Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to our webinar entitled, How Far Are We in the Agroecological Transition? The contribution of the tool for agroecology performance evaluation, or better known as TAPE. I am Ronnie Brathwaite, the leader of the FAO Ecosystems Approach to Sustainable Crop Production Intensification team. I will have the pleasure to guide you through this event this afternoon. The tool for agroecology performance evaluation, in short, TAPE, has been an important milestone to harmonize evidence of the positive impacts of agroecology. Since its development in 2019, the TAPE has already been implemented in a large number of countries and projects. Today, we have the chance to hear from some of these projects, experiences, and the implementation of TAPE. For your information, before we start, let me share with you a few housekeeping rules. This event is being recorded and will be available afterwards on FAO website, fao.org/webcast. Interpretation is available in 3 UN languages, that's English, Spanish, and French. The globe icon for selecting the preferred language can be found at the bottom bar of your Zoom screen. If you are following on webcast, you can select the language of your choice in the drop-down menu right below the video. Please provide your comments and questions through the chat box. Every effort will be made to address these questions during the Q&A session at the end of the second part of the event. As you see, we have a packed agenda. We will have an opening from Mr. Thanawat Tiensen, Director of FAO's Animal Production and Health Division. We will then follow on with 2 main sections of the event. In the first session, we have an overview of how TAPE was developed, and you will discover the results. In the second session, you will get the insights from partners that implemented TAPE in 4 different regions. Finally, after a Q&A session and a recap on the next steps, Mr. Jingyuan Xia, Director of FAO's Plant Production and Protection Division, will give the closing remarks. And with that, let me invite you to view a video from Director of FAO's Animal Production and Health Division, Mr. Thanawat Tiensen.
Distinguished guests, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to open these important events on TAPE, the tool for agroecology's performance evaluation. Today, we are going to hear from FAO colleagues and partners working in 5 different countries. FAO is committed to support the transformation of our agri-food system for better production, better nutrition, better environment, and a better life. And agroecology is a promising approach for achieving this and to make progress on the SDGs. Since 2014, FAO has facilitated the global and regional dialogues on agroecology. The Scaling Up Agroecology initiative was launched in 2018 to catalyze cooperation on agroecology within the UN system through policy process, building connection, sharing knowledge and information. TAPE contributes to the Scaling Up initiative, especially knowledge sharing and innovation. TAPE was created to respond to a mandate received from FAO members during the Committee on Agriculture COAG in 2018. This mandate was to work on metrics and indicators for agroecology, and it was later echoed by the policy recommendations on agroecological and other innovative approaches of the Committee on World Food Security CFS in 2019 when I was the chair of the CFS. TAPE was developed in a participatory way with partners from local government, civil society, research and academia, producers and indigenous people organizations all over the world. Let me thank all of them for their continuous support. For FAO, TAPE is also a good example of collaborative work between disciplines and divisions, especially between the Plant Protection Division and the Animal Production and Health Division, who are jointly coordinating this initiative. Let me tell you that a great deal has been accomplished. The first tape pilot was launched only 2 years ago in 2020, and yet we now have data from over 30 countries, 5,000 households in 24 languages. Today, we will see the varieties of contexts where tape was applied and what the result can tell us about the role of agroecology for better nutrition, gender equity, productivities and incomes, biodiversity, soil health, and youth empowerment. We will also hear about the role of livestock in agroecological transition and how important livestock are for our agri-food system. We see tape as an asset for sustainable livestock transformation initiative we are currently developing. And livestock is a part of solution. Livestock is a part of agri-food system. Today, we will also receive feedback from partners who applied tape in Argentina, Burkina Faso, Cambodia, Switzerland, and Kenya. Let me thank them for their valuable contributions over the years. I'm very happy to see that more than 1,000 participants registered for these events, as this shows your interest in FAO work on metrics and indicators for agroecology. This webinar is a useful milestone to share and disseminate this information. Other events will follow as we are committed to continuing this participatory process in a spirit of co-creation and knowledge sharing. Together, we make a difference for sustainable agri-food system and sustainable livestock transformation. Thank you very much.
And thanks to Mr. Tiensen for his inspiring remarks on the development of tape. We will now hear from Mr. Remy Clousset, Agroecology Advisor at FAO Plant Production and Protection Division, about the development process of tape. I hand over to you, Mr. Clousset. We don't hear you, Remy.
Bonjour à tous. So let me share my presentation. I will speak in French, so please use the translation mode. Is it okay?
Yes, please proceed.
OK. So, donc, je vais vous présenter le mandat de TAPE, son processus de développement et les objectifs visés. Donc, voici un point de contexte général et un retour sur les 8 années passées avec la montée en puissance de l'agroécologie sur le terrain, mais également au niveau institutionnel. Le point de départ côté FAO, comme ça a été rappelé par le directeur Tiensen, a été l'organisation d'un cycle de consultation globale durant 4 ans, donc de 2014 à 2018, avec des séminaires multi-acteurs sur l'agroécologie qui ont rassemblé en présentiel plus de 1500 personnes. Le séminaire de clôture, qui a été organisé à Rome en 2018, a été l'occasion donc de lancer l'initiative de passage à l'échelle supérieure de l'agroécologie, la Scaling Up Agroecology Initiative, et de présenter des 10 éléments de l'agroécologie qui étaient le fruit de ces 4 années d'échange. Une des recommandations clés du séminaire et des séminaires régionaux également ont été de compléter nos systèmes de mesure, en gros de mesurer autrement en analysant la performance de l'agriculture au-delà des variables liées au rendement annuel ou aux seuls critères économiques. C'est à ce moment qu'a commencé le développement de TAPE. Cette recommandation a été entendue par les pays membres de la FAO qui ont donné un mandat à l'organisation par l'intermédiaire du COAG, qui est le Comité de l'Agriculture. L'année suivante, les 10 éléments de l'agroécologie ont fait l'objet d'un examen officiel par nos instances et ont été adoptés formellement en décembre 2019 par l'ensemble des pays membres, donc le Conseil de la FAO. Le cadre d'analyse de TAPE, enfin les cadres d'analyse de TAPE, comme vous verrez, les processus de collecte des données en ligne ont été lancés en 2019, suivis par la mise en place de tests pilotes avec nos partenaires. En 2021, les recommandations politiques du Comité de sécurité alimentaire mondial, le CSA ou le CSF en anglais, sur l'agroécologie et autres approches innovantes ont été publiées. Elle donnait suite à la publication également en 2019 du rapport du panel d'experts de haut niveau sur la sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle qui a introduit les 13 principes de l'agroécologie, alignés avec les 10 éléments. Il y a également la coalition agroécologie qui a été créée, qui regroupe aujourd'hui plus de 40 pays et 80 organisations, ainsi que la TPP, la plateforme transformative sur l'agroécologie. Je vous envoie les liens dans le chat de ces organisations. Le mandat de TAPE, dont je vous parlais tout à l'heure du QUAG, donc le mandat est d'assister les pays et les régions en renforçant le travail normatif basé sur la science et l'évidence sur l'agroécologie, en développant des systèmes de mesure, des outils et protocoles pour évaluer la contribution de l'agroécologie et des autres approches à la transformation vers un système alimentaire durable. Nous allons voir ici les 10 éléments de l'agroécologie qui ont été utilisés comme base pour TAPE. Donc, ils permettent de caractériser l'agroécologie dans toutes ses dimensions, au-delà de la seule définition. Ils ne sont pas trop prescriptifs et ils reflètent les multiples formes que prend l'agroécologie en fonction des contextes. Nous trouvons les principes écologiques appliqués à l'agronomie, comme l'importance de la diversité de production dans le temps et dans l'espace, qui favorisent les synergies, le recyclage, l'efficience au niveau des cycles naturels et la résilience, mais ils insistent également sur la co-création, la coproduction et le partage de la connaissance, et sur des notions qui concernent l'ensemble du système alimentaire, puisque c'est de ça qu'il s'agit, avec la gouvernance, avec les valeurs humaines et sociales, les cultures et traditions, économie circulaire et solidaire. Donc cette série de 4 diapositives, je vais témoigner rapidement sur l'état d'esprit qui a prévalu à la création de TAPE. Il se résume à 20 principes qui sont élaborés. Alors on va vous les mettre dans le chat, je ne vais pas vous dire les 20, mais l'idée, c'est de garder un cap quand on réalisait l'outil, de garder son cap et de savoir vers où on voulait aller. Alors, sur le processus d'élaboration, le premier point était de mener en 2018 une revue des grilles existantes. Alors, dans les différentes régions, donc, il y a MESMIS, la méthode de SOCLA, IDEA, le biomètre de l'agroécologie, la mesure des impacts du zéro budget natural farming. On va vous mettre aussi également le lien vers ces différentes méthodes. Et l'idée, c'était dans un premier temps de les analyser. Et ensuite, il y a un travail d'élaboration participatif qui a été mené avec les concepteurs de ces grilles, avec des représentants des organisations de producteurs, des chercheurs, des représentants des gouvernements des 5 continents, avec des groupes de travail international à Rome, des groupes de travail régionaux, comme vous pouvez le voir, des consultations en ligne et des tests pilotes. Sur la pertinence des données produites, il est apparu que le cadre conceptuel de TAPE devait tourner autour de 2 pivots. Le premier, c'est la mesure de la transition agroécologique, pour pouvoir situer l'exploitation dont on analyse les performances sur une échelle de transition. Donc, il fallait opérationnaliser les 10 éléments. Deuxièmement, sur la mesure des multiples performances de l'agroécologie, avec les objectifs de développement durable comme boussole. Il a été essayé de partir sur un nombre limité de critères avec des indicateurs simples, comme base commune à tous. L'idée est également de pouvoir en ajouter en fonction du contexte, bien évidemment. Sur la portée de l'outil, il devait être applicable largement, robuste, bien entendu, suffisamment flexible et adaptable pour s'adapter au contexte et aux différents systèmes agricoles. Nous le verrons dans les exemples à suivre. Il devait collecter aussi les données au niveau des foyers, mais permettre une analyse au niveau des communautés et des territoires par une agrégation. Les données pouvaient également être désagrégées, par exemple hommes et femmes. Enfin, sur la collecte et la gestion des données, l'idée était de minimiser le coût et la pénibilité de la collecte des données pour pouvoir mener un travail dans la durée. La participation et l'implication des producteurs et l'organisation est apparue comme fondamentale, de même que la diversité des sources et des types de données. Alors maintenant, pour venir aux objectifs de TAPE, nous retrouvons 3 objectifs principaux. Le premier étant celui qui a déclenché la création de TAPE. Donc, fournir des preuves globales et harmonisées sur la performance multidimensionnelle des systèmes agroécologiques, accompagner la transition agroécologique en proposant un diagnostic des performances dans le temps et en identifiant les points forts et les faiblesses et les facteurs facilitants et bloquants pour la transition. Et le troisième point, c'est développer les capacités des producteurs et des partenaires grâce à un processus collectif de production et de partage des données. L'idée est de les impliquer au maximum dans la collecte et l'analyse. Alors, les applications de TAPE sont nombreuses, en fait. Au-delà de l'idée de collecter des données pour l'évidence, le processus a une utilité pour le design de projet, le suivi et évaluation de projet, ou établir des points d'entrée pour des interventions de politique publique. Ce sera illustré dans les parties suivantes. Pour venir au fonctionnement de TAPE maintenant, la mise en œuvre de l'outil se décline en plusieurs étapes. L'étape 0 consiste en l'analyse du contexte, le milieu, les systèmes de production, les politiques publiques existantes qui peuvent faciliter ou freiner la transition. Les étapes 1 et les étapes 2 qui sont entourées utilisent les deux cadres d'analyse, l'évaluation de la transition agroécologique avec les 10 éléments et le diagnostic de la performance avec les 10 critères de performance que nous allons voir tout à l'heure, en lien avec les objectifs de développement durable. Une étape facultative 1 bis consiste à élaborer des typologies et l'étape 3 consiste en l'analyse et l'appropriation collective des résultats pour en tirer des recommandations utiles, nous le verrons également. Alors, c'est important de dire également que les différentes étapes sont conduites par les acteurs eux-mêmes, avec un appui apporté par l'équipe FAO à la demande. Bon, pour les étapes 1 et les étapes 2, qui nécessitent une connaissance des grilles d'analyse, des formations sont dispensées, soit en présentiel, soit en ligne, soit par l'intermédiaire de vidéos disponibles pour que les enquêtes puissent être réalisées de manière autonome. Donc, je vais aller un peu plus loin dans le détail des étapes 1 et 2. Les 0 et 3 seront présentés plus loin. Donc, pour l'étape 1, alors l'idée a été de prendre donc, les 10 éléments et de les rendre opérationnels à moyen de 36 données qui permettent une analyse plus précise. Alors là, on prend l'exemple de la diversité, par exemple, le premier, voilà, la diversité. Elle se décompose en 4 indices. La diversité des cultures, des animaux, des plantes pérennes, des activités économiques. Ensuite, chaque indice est évalué au moyen d'une échelle descriptive qui a 5 niveaux. Du niveau noté 0, ici, alors pour les cultures, il y a la monoculture au niveau 0, et au niveau 4, avec une plus grande diversification des cultures et des variétés adaptées localement. Maintenant, pour comprendre le mécanisme, je vous propose un zoom sur l'élément diversité, donc avec les 4 indices qu'on a vu tout à l'heure, et chacun a ses 5 échelles pour les évaluer. Et ensuite, si je dézoome, vous avez à nouveau votre élément diversité qu'on a vu avec les 4 indices, mais vous avez également tous les autres éléments, donc les 10, qui ont leur propre indice, voilà, pour les évaluer. Et enfin, la dernière étape, l'étape 2, que je voulais vous présenter, donc c'est le deuxième cadre d'analyse, ce sont les 10 critères de performance qui ont été choisis comme dénominateur commun pour tous les pilotes TAPE. L'idée, c'est d'avoir des données communes et agrégeables. Donc, ils sont décomposés dans les 5 dimensions qui ont été jugées prioritaires par nos partenaires lors de l'évaluation. Donc, la gouvernance, qui se décline au niveau du critère du foncier sécurisé, l'économie avec 3 critères, productivité, revenus, valeur ajoutée, la santé et la nutrition, avec l'exposition aux pesticides et la diversité des diètes, la société et la culture, autonomisation des femmes et emploi des jeunes, et l'environnement avec l'agrobiodiversité et la santé du sol. Donc, ces 10 indices sont une base minimum pour avoir des données harmonisées. Il est possible, comme je l'ai dit, de rajouter des critères supplémentaires. Ils sont choisis car ils sont simples à mesurer et en lien direct avec les ODD, et notamment la cible de 4, production alimentaire durable et pratiques agricoles résilientes, et l'indicateur 2.4.1 que vous voyez souvent dans ce tableau, proportion de zones agricoles sur agriculture durable et productive. Voilà pour un premier tour d'horizon rapide. Je vous remercie de votre attention et j'aurai la parole à Ronnie, notre modérateur.
Yes, thank you very much, Remy, for setting the scene. We will now hear from Mr. Dario Lucantoni, sorry. He's a livestock and agroecology specialist at the FAO in the Animal Production and Health Division. Mr. Lucantoni, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. So I'm going to present the overview on TAPE database and the progress to date. So let's begin with the map for TAPE in numbers. What is there in the database? 5,036 farms or households evaluated in 40 countries. And more specifically, we have 6 countries in Latin America, 10 countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, 7 countries in Asian Pacific, 16 countries in Europe and Central Asia, and 1 country in the Middle East. So this diversity of countries engender the diversity of languages. So we have tape already available in 24 languages, not only the 6 official languages of the United Nations, so Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish, but also 1 African language, 5 Asian languages, and 12 European languages. So this translation is necessary, is crucial for appropriation, so the enumerators can appropriate the tool, but also the producers themselves. So if we see the distribution of the 40 countries where tape has been implemented, it is quite balanced. But when we see the number of observations, it's not balanced at all. So we have almost 70% of the farm households evaluated with tape, which come from sub-Saharan African countries, 12% from Asia and the Pacific, 7% from Latin America and the Caribbean, and 5% from Europe and Middle East. So these numbers are not, this is not our choice. This is due to the demand of tape studies, and so the number of farms evaluated is higher in sub-Saharan Africa because we received more demand to use tape in those countries. So let's have a look at the demand about tape. So this is another map with the different type of assessment we did in the different countries. So in green, we begin with the piloting phase funded by FAO. So at the beginning of tape, we funded some studies in the field to test, to pilot test the tool. So we began in 2018 with the first workshop in Bangkok and the first tests in Cambodia and China. The year later in Mexico, the second workshop on tape and tests in Mexico and Argentina. After that, we couldn't unfortunately do any more training in person, but we continued virtually. And there was a big request of tape for supporting project baselines, monitoring and evaluation, and impact evaluation from international organizations and funds like FAO, IFAD, and JEF. So here we began with the JEF projects led by FAO in Mali, Burkina Faso, Senegal, and Yemen. There were also more projects to support FAO projects in Ethiopia, Dominica, and Guyana. We also worked with IFAD, IFAD's role project in Lesotho. And also we did an impact evaluation ex post in a FAO project in Mozambique. So we not only supported international organizations and funds in their project, but also NGOs. There was quite a big request for several NGOs to use tape once again, for baseline M&E tool, but also to evaluate some of typologies of farms or some specific territories where these NGOs were working. I will mention some of their main ones. So DCA, that use tape in Nepal, in Cambodia, in Uganda, ILDP in Tanzania, Enabel and Louvain Coopération in Congo, PolyACP in Benin, Eclosio in Bolivia and Peru, and Scuola Campesina in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. So we are not only supporting the work of international projects and NGOs, but also in yellow, you will see these are the countries in which tape has been used for research and by academia. So for example, in master thesis or PhD studies, but also in other kind of research and peer-reviewed article to characterize the level of agroecological transition of specific territories. So this is the demand. When we translate this into numbers, we see that the big majority of the observation the evaluation we did with tape, they have been done in support to project baseline monitoring and evaluation and impact evaluation of international projects funded by JEF, IFAD, and FAO. It's in blue, 57%. In support of NGOs, it's 22%. So more than 3/4 of the tape observation that we have been done in support to projects to include the agroecological approach into these works. Only 14% are the studies which have been funded by FAO in the pilot phase. and 8% is the observation done through researchers in academia. So what can we find in the database? In the database, we have the data from step 1, of course, that have been presented by Remy. So the data about the 10 elements of agroecology of each farms and their indices. We have the information about the criteria of performance in step 2 and several other sub-indicators and information about other indicators of performance related to the SDGs. And of course, we have also the characteristics of the farms. So the step 0, we have, for example, the location of the farms. Here in the map, you can see this is the location of the farms that we have evaluated in Senegal. But we also have, for example, the size of the area in production for each farm. So we can see the global average of our database. We have data about crop production, the area under pasture lands, the area under natural vegetation. Of course, here you can see that in our database, there are very big difference between the maximum and the minimum because tape can be applied to any kind of production system in agriculture. We have, for example, the data about the composition of the households. Here, the data are disaggregated by continent. Of course, they are not representative. These are just the results that we have in our database currently. But for example, here, with gender disaggregated data and the age disaggregated data, we can know, for example, what is the importance of the women workforce on farm and the presence of women on farm, or the presence of youth on farm, for example. Here you can see how crucial is the presence of youth for sustainable agriculture in Africa, for example. And of course, we have also other data that describe the type of production system that we have. For example, we can know what is the percentage of households that raise livestock, or what is the dietary diversity score for each of the farms assessed. So here we are already entering in the presentation of the results for step 1 and step 2. So I will leave the floor to my colleague Anne to continue this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dario. Very insightful information. Let's move on next to Anne Motet. Anne is a livestock development officer at FAO's Animal Production and Health Division. She will present the progress to date and give an overview of the results. Please, Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ronnie. So I'm just going to show some preliminary results and some examples of the analysis that we conducted using what we have in the database presented by Dario. And I would like to thank our colleague Angelita Rubalcaba, who helped with this analysis. So what I'm going to present is about a bit more than 3,000 farms observations from 9 different countries. Most of this is still unpublished, except for the reports on Mali and Lesotho. When we look at the average score over the 10 elements of agroecology, so this is the average score for the step 1 of TAPE, that we also call CAET, Characterization of Agroecological Transition, we see that in this sample, we have about 1/3 of the farms or the households assessed that are over 50%. So here we could consider, if we propose a threshold, that they are already engaged in their agroecological transition. We have about 28%, a bit less than a third, that are just under this 50% threshold, and we could consider that they're just initiating their transition. So this is a type of first analysis we can conduct when we look at global averages over the 10 elements. Next slide. Thank you. So then if we look at the details of the 10 elements, and we're still here in step 1, you have a matrix of correlations between the average CAET score, so the 10 elements average at the top line or the first column, and then how it relates to each of the individual 10 elements. And what we see in this sample for Sub-Saharan Africa, we see that the highest correlations are found with the element of resilience and co-creation and sharing of knowledge. So they seem to contribute more to the average transition score than, for example, elements that describe the characteristics of the system, such as diversity or efficiency. Next slide, please. And then if we go further into the analysis, and don't worry, I'm not going to look at each of these correlation score, but this is just a schematic view so you can understand how we're exploring the data at the moment. So you have still the average CAET score at the top line and the first column. And then you find what Rémi explained about the step 2, which are the core criteria of performance, the 10 core criteria of performance. So I'm not going to look into all of them, but we picked a couple of them to explain how they are linked to each other. Next slide, please. So first, when we look at nutritional diversity, we group the farms, the more than 3,000 farms we have in this sample, in categories of CAET score, from the less agroecological, that are under 30% average, to the more agroecological, over 70%. And what we find here is a positive and significant correlation between the degree, the advancement in the agroecological transition, and the nutritional score. So more advanced farms over the 10 elements have higher nutritional diversity. Next slide, please. And when we look at, for example, 2 core criteria giving information about the environmental performance, we see that we find the same level of correlation and the same significance with, for example, on the left here, the index that is calculated in TAPE for soil health. So more agroecological farms have higher soil health indices. And we find also on the right-hand side, higher diversity, and in particular, agricultural biodiversity in terms of crop animals, but also the presence of natural vegetation and pollinators. Next slide, please. Just to show an example of how we can look at the distribution of those 3,000 farms. So when you look at this distribution in terms of the agrobiodiversity score and the characterization of agroecological transition, so again, the average score over the CAET, you see that you can find this trend. And when we look at the breakdown in the 9 countries that contribute to this sample in sub-Saharan Africa, we see that it is more observable, it is more, the correlation looks more visible in some countries than others. For example, if you compare the cloud of farms for Burkina Faso and Mali, for example. Next slide, please. Now, when we look at economic results, we also find this correlation and these positive trends between the level of transition and the economic output of the farm. So here we represented the median in terms of net revenue per capita and the median of value added per capita for each group of farms. And we see that we do have higher economic outputs in farms that have higher scores over the 10 elements. Next slide, please. So going back to our diversity of results, we have step 1, we have step 2. We also looked into the role of livestock in the agroecological transition, and we have different variables, different indicators for that, as explained by Dario. We can look, for example, at an indicator of farms with no livestock. So if you remember from the global data presented by Dario, about 80%, I believe, of the farms we sampled do include some form of livestock. But when you look at the correlation between this variable and other variables in our analysis, no livestock is the only variable that has a negative correlation with the CAET score, with the score over the 10 elements. All the other variables seem to be either non-correlated or positively correlated. Next slide, please. So going into the details, what we found in terms of the role of livestock is that the CAET score, so the 10 elements, is positively correlated with the diversity of animals on farm, the number of livestock units present on farm, and the score of animal welfare. We found moderate correlations between the number of livestock units and a number of variables like added value per person, nutritional diversity, and agricultural biodiversity. We also found moderate correlations between animal diversity and the score of nutritional diversity and the score of youth employment. And we also did not find some links that we expected. For example, a link between livestock diversity or the number of animals and soil health was not detected in this sample. Next slide, please. So before I finish on this overview of the results, we also looked into the contribution of the number of animals on farm and the economic output. And we used here a proxy that was proposed by Van der Ploeg et al. In 2019, looking at the ratio between the value added and the gross value of agricultural production. And what we see is that with a reasonable number of animals, as you can see, the maximum here is only 15, we have positive outcomes on the economic results of the farm. Next slide, please. And finally, we looked at particular variables, looking at indices describing the 10 elements and grouping them differently than with the 10 elements. So for example, looking at management practices, we looked into the management of water, energy, seeds, and breeds. But also a very interesting one is this variable of local food systems. And we found very interesting results between the role of local food systems and the transition to agroecology. In the next slide, please. When you look at the distribution of the households surveyed in Sub-Saharan Africa, in those 9 countries, we found some positive correlation between the degree of agroecological transition and the presence of local food systems. So this seems to be an important condition for the transition. And again, we see that this correlation is more visible in some countries than others. For example, if you compare the cloud of points of Mali or Mozambique on the right-hand side of the slide. Thank you, and I give the floor back to you, Ronnie. Over.
Thank you, Anne. Very interesting results you have there. I now invite Frank Escobar. He's a consultant on agroecology policies with the Plant Production and Protection Division of FAO. He will say a bit about the linkages of local contexts and policies. Over to you, Frank.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, go ahead, Frank.
So, well, first of all, thank you everybody for being here. My presentation will focus on the links from the context to the policies. In this case, I don't want to be repetitive of everything that was already done, so I will focus on the importance of completing the steps of TAPE, the stepwise approach that was developed since the beginning to actually bring the data back to inform policymakers and inform like policies based on the data. So to start with, we can mention that agroecology is being practiced around the world in different contexts and complex in different contexts. So understanding this context, and this is the importance of step 0, understanding this context in which the tool will be implemented, it will give us the opportunity to make relevant links to specific interventions that can support transition to agroecology. So the correlation of the different steps, including like step 0, the characterization step 1, the performance step 2, and the validation on step 3, is what really brings this multidimensional analysis and identify different contributions that different agri-food systems are doing to the SDGs. I wanted to touch also the step 3, the validation, because this is something that has been missing from the whole like sample of TAPE implementations given to different problems like COVID that didn't allow for people to like get together and discuss in a participatory way the results. So closing the circle, bringing back this information to the actors, to the territories in a participatory way is important for the decision-making process. Next, please. I will be faster, sorry. But so step 0, as we know, step 0 includes the description of main socioeconomic, environmental, and demographic characteristics. But in this presentation, I will focus a little bit on the legal and policy frameworks for creating an enabling environment to transition to agroecology. These policy frameworks are different in different countries and different regions. Some focusing on production, some focusing on environmental issues. But the important is that all of this needs to be captured in the context to start understanding why farmers are acting or producing the way they are, and the willingness of farmers to like transition if there are like opportunities put in place. Also, it's important to given the time and also like the institutions are applying the tool, like NGOs or government institutions have really good opportunities to go into key informants and ask questions about why some of the performance of the system is like that, and what are the willingness or like the plans to like change. So Dario, the next one, please. So I'm just going to talk about two examples, and I don't want to touch the examples of the presenters that are following me. So in the case of Uganda, assessing the performance of agroecological production in Uganda, the government has been working on the National Adaptation Plan for the agricultural sector since 2018. Also the National Development Plan and the National Climate Change Policy. These three combined create an enabling environment for farmers to transition, but their objective was to analyze the reach of these policies. If farmers are knowledgeable about these projects or programs or policies, and also the gap and weaknesses of the system that can be improved. This project was implemented by our implementing partners for this project was Danish Church Aid, that was the funding, Makerere University in Uganda, so with the support of Socadido, TEDO, and local governments. So the context highlighted four main challenges: the low productivity due to climate change, the low value added to agricultural products, the lack of access to markets, and the presence of policies that also provide chemical inputs for pest and disease control. Dario, please, next. So in this case, the results, and this, of course, we are putting the disclaimer that this is without the step 3. So it was not possible at the time of the implementation to like bring back this result and communicate it to the communities and like have this discussion about the possible next steps. So there's a high level of agrobiodiversity with only 4% of farmers monocropping system. Also, there's a high result score on soil health, 3.6 out of 5, and it's a strong community support. However, in this case, the elements of recycling, synergies, and resilience were really low. So it was identified that the need to strengthen the co-creation and sharing of knowledge regarding agroecological practices, given that there's big opportunities to upscale agroecology, but lack of knowledge about specific practices, given that the support mostly comes from in like the market also determines the production. So there's opportunities to like grow there. On a country that culturally customary land, customary ownership accounts for 90% of the land. So families feel secure to have the access to land, but they don't own the land. In those regards, only 14% of the farms were led by women, with only 5% of women owning land. So policies should include a stronger gender component to promote equal access and participation on the decisions. Also, we identified that, as I mentioned before, given the 61% of agrobiodiversity, most of them is determined by the external markets. So farmers, the dietary diversity score show that farmers only consume less than 50% of what they produce. So this is something that can create opportunities to establish short circuit markets, commercial networks, given the strong community support. So farmers have more decisions in what they sell and what they can use for self-consumption. The next one, please. This is another use of the tool. Like the multifunctionality of tape allows for not only establish the reach, but also how can we link established policies to the agroecological production. In this case, our implementing partner was the National Agricultural Research and Extension Institute of the Ministry of Agriculture in Guyana, and the context focused on 3 aspects: the level of diversity of farmers and the practices that they're using, how to link community-based school feeding programs to agroecological productions for the provision of healthier and more nutritious food, and highlight the gaps of knowledge in the agri-food system to enter and support co-creation and sharing of knowledge for adoption of more sustainable practices. Next one, please. So out of the results that we had in this case, even though if they are low, it can give us like a perception of how the system is. We have that the CAD %, the characterization of agroecological transition is below 50, with only 50% of farm over 60. So it's also not on a specifically high level. So diversification of production systems and reduction of the use of agrochemicals is key to establish these links with the school feeding programs. Also, we have that the low levels of efficiency, synergies, and recycling give space for policies to focus on knowledge sharing, in that there are possibilities of upscaling with farms already practicing agroecology. So horizontal learning between farmers is something that can provide like open the space for other farmers to also incorporate themselves in these programs. And the promotion of differentiated market opportunities, like in this case, public procurement processes for buying food for schools, by enhancing the organization of farmers, by teaching farmers how to come together and apply for this type of programs and have decision over what is like producing their farms and income generating activities can support this transition in an agri-food system level, not just as a production level. Next one, please. So these were just 2 examples out of the 20 examples that completed more or less the process until like the first 3 steps, missing the step 3. But I want to just highlight here the case of Argentina that is going to be after me. They completed the 4 steps, so it will be really good to hear from them and their results. So to finish, step 3 is just about bringing back the results to the community, like bringing participation of the community in the decisions, also having like other representatives, government institutions, actors, private sector, in the way that all the results can be applied in a way that everybody feels that this support is something relevant. So first of all, we can verify the adequate and the performance of the framework, how well was performed, how well it performed, how it was established, the importance of the context, and so on. Second is revise and analyze and identify the different gaps and opportunities, willingness to support opportunities of like new policies or like probably programs that can be implemented, and the design of way forwards. In this design of way forwards, FAO is working on like trying to like get the elements of agroecology as a framework for the redesign of the food system. Which entry points can you determine that are the most relevant, and from there having an agri-food system approach more than just increased production. So in my participation, it was like I finish here, and I hope like we have a good continuation of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank, for linking the data with policies. I think we will hear more about this when the countries present. With this, we conclude the first session of this event, and we will now move over to session 2, where we will hear the experiences with TAPE from the different countries and projects. We will start with Mr. Alejandro Morengo, project manager at the Instituto de Intervenciones Situadas in situ in Argentina, and Mauro Casella, advisor and at the same institute. They have both worked closely with TAPE and will now share their experience with us. Mr. Marengo and Mr. Casella, please.
Hola, buenos días. Voy a hablar en español. Voy a compartir pantalla para mostrarles nuestra experiencia en Argentina, que es una experiencia que está, como comentaba Frank, pudimos desarrollar los 4 pasos de la metodología y está publicada para todo el mundo, disponible en la página de FAO. Nosotros trabajamos en relación al contexto en el área metropolitana de la ciudad de Rosario, que es una ciudad de 1 millón de habitantes. Trabajamos centrados en 5 gobiernos locales. Esta zona del país es una zona caracterizada por tener algunos de los suelos más fértiles del mundo, lo cual impacta en un nivel de productividad realmente muy elevado. Lo que pueden ver allí es el mapa de producción de soja, que es justamente la producción que más se emplea en nuestra zona. En la última campaña se produjeron, para que ustedes tengan una idea, más de 120 millones de toneladas de soja, y hay una gran incorporación de tecnología para este tipo de producción. Algunas problemáticas que tiene esta forma de producir. Bueno, primero la gran carbono dependencia que tiene esta producción, lo cual impacta en la inflación de los alimentos. También se producen problemas de salud socioambiental. El mapa que ven ahí es la niñez en riesgo por exposición a agroquímicos. También hay problemas socioeconómicos, fundamentalmente de concentración económica, lo que impacta en un fuerte éxodo rural, es decir, tenemos una pérdida constante de agricultores. No obstante ello, sobreviven algunos agricultores familiares, tanto en producción de commodities para exportación como producción de alimentos en la cercanía de la ciudad, lo que nosotros llamamos agricultura periurbana, que es muy importante para nuestro estudio. En relación al paso 1, nosotros trabajamos con 60 establecimientos y trabajamos con 3 tipologías de análisis. La primera, según el nivel de CAET, donde ustedes pueden ver allí los resultados, casi la mitad de los establecimientos que analizamos están en algún nivel de transición agroecológica. También trabajamos con una caracterización por el tipo de producción predominante. Identificamos 3 categorías de hortalizas, producción extensiva y mixta, donde podemos ver que un establecimiento con monocultivo de soja convencional solo llega a un CAET de 31 contra un establecimiento con producción ganadera, por el solo hecho de tener animales, reforzando lo que decía Ann anteriormente, ya llega a un CAET de 46. Y después identificamos una tercera tipología, que es si se aplican productos de síntesis química o no. Pueden ver que solamente por no aplicar productos de síntesis química ya tiene un impacto realmente muy alto, con lo cual uno de los objetivos que tenía nuestro estudio, que era un objetivo comparativo, realmente nos dio resultados muy interesantes en relación a comparar los sistemas convencionales con los agroecológicos. En cuanto a al índice de correlación, vemos que el elemento que más influye en la transición es la creación conjunta de conocimientos, seguido de elementos relacionados a las técnicas productivas como la eficiencia y la sinergia, y también a elementos de contexto, destacándose la presencia de mercados alternativos para comercialización. En cuanto al paso 2, comparto algunas conclusiones de la dimensión económica. Se puede ver que hay una caída en gastos muy importantes según los niveles de transición agroecológica, seguida de una mayor percepción de ingresos a medida que se desarrolla la agroecología. También un resultado muy importante que pudimos ver, coincide con lo que presentaba Ann anteriormente, es este gráfico de U, que nos muestra que a medida que se avanza en agroecología, el valor total de la producción aumenta y también aumentan los ingresos netos por persona en la producción, que sigue la misma lógica que nos planteaba la teoría ecológica cuando analizaba el par productividad-sostenibilidad. También en relación a esto, conclusiones muy importantes en relación a la transición agroecológica, que nos muestra que en la transición inicial se necesita más apoyo porque los agricultores tienen una reducción de ingresos netos que después es revertida cuando se logran niveles más altos de agroecología, y nos muestra que la transición agroecológica no es una transición, sino que es un conjunto de transiciones que vincula a la innovación técnica, a la innovación institucional, entre otros cambios que se requieren desarrollar. En cuanto a la dimensión ambiental, tenemos que las prácticas ecológicas reducen los costos de producción, que la salud del suelo es la base para desarrollar el sistema. A más agroecología, mayor salud del suelo, y también a mayor agroecología, mayor diversidad. Tenemos también, en cuanto a la dimensión social, algunas conclusiones. Encontramos que hay mayor agricultura familiar, a mayor desarrollo de la agroecología, las mujeres están más empoderadas y más incluidas en el proceso de toma de decisiones, los jóvenes también están más involucrados en la agricultura, y se identificaron dietas más sanas y equilibradas, sobre todo en el nivel más desarrollado de la agroecología. Nosotros desarrollamos también, anexado a la encuesta oficial de TAPE, una encuesta propia donde pudimos ver que a mayor desarrollo de la agroecología tenemos menor éxodo rural, con más gente en el campo, trabajando más cerca de su producción. En relación al paso 3, a la restitución de los resultados, pudimos desarrollarlo en la Facultad de Ciencias Agrarias de la zona de estudio, con 85 asistentes. Trabajamos en un taller donde tuvimos un tablero de apuestas, donde ponderamos los elementos del CAET y los índices que componen el CAET, y una conclusión importante es que la visión más técnica, representada por organizaciones y gobiernos, tendió a ponderar los elementos vinculados al contexto, y las mesas donde trabajaron exclusivamente agricultores tendieron a ponderar más las técnicas productivas. Pudimos identificar varias recomendaciones de política con algún feedback con las autoridades locales, y todo este material está disponible para su descarga. También está disponible en YouTube, en nuestra página web, todo el paso 3, son 3 horas de video donde pueden ver todo lo que ocurrió allí. Y bueno, gracias a nuestro equipo por el trabajo que realmente nos resultó muy importante. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marengo, for sharing your experience and insights. Very interesting case study there in Argentina. Now, I would like to hand over to Anina Gilgan, Research Associate at Agroscope, and Lutz Merbold. Sorry if I mispronounced your names. She is the head of Agroecology and Environment Strategic Research Division. And they have experience with implementing TAPE in Switzerland and Kenya, and I have even further developed parts of the tool. Ms. Gilgan and Mr. Merbold, the floor is yours.
All right, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to wherever you are. I'm going to represent on behalf of the team. My name is Lutz Merbold, and I'm going to represent this advancing the biodiversity indicator of TAPE, which means we're trying to make an existing tool even better than it is actually. And it's really on behalf of the people you see here. And basically, I want to quickly introduce you to this small research project. The background is that within Switzerland, where we are currently based, we have an existing farm network of approximately 300 farms since 2009. And within this farm network, we are calculating several agri-environmental indicators, talking about erosion, biodiversity, etc. And biodiversity is not just agri-biodiversity as within TAPE, but we're actually doing that at a landscape scale, or looking at pollinators, at different plant species, and for instance, also the abundance of spiders, etc. So we do have a pretty good understanding of biodiversity. And our idea was, how can we actually sort of transfer some of this knowledge into TAPE? At the same time, we are not so good in sort of assessing the agroecological status of a Swiss farming system. And that's the reason why we really sort of sat together, and following the element of co-creation and sharing of knowledge, we developed this project. So what are we trying to achieve? We want to test TAPE in Switzerland, and I'm going to show you in a second a couple of results. Then we want to try to develop an improved biodiversity indicator for TAPE, which can be easily used and implemented, which is based on the Swiss lessons learned. And also we would like to test this in improved indicator and TAPE in Kenya. So, and directly jumping into the Swiss results, I'm showing you here just step 1 for the beginning. On the right side, you see where we actually had our farm interviews taking place in Switzerland. And then we tried to sort of aggregate our data into regions, the hill region, the mountain region, and the valley region. And as you can see, the mountain regions are sticking out a little bit in the step 1 analysis, where we find a lower diversity, but sort of higher synergies and efficiency in recycling. Why is that? Well, after all, when you think about TAPE, the agri-biodiversity is basically looking at species breeds or crop types. And we know from the mountain regions that this is predominantly grazing systems. So we only have, following one value chain, we only have cattle or goats, and thus the diversity score is a bit lower than in the hill region or the valley region. Whereas the efficiency and the synergies and recycling is quite better, because we're having almost no pesticides being applied, but we're doing the recycling of all the nutrients. And I mean, the animals are grazing on the pastures. That's the reason why they're actually performing better. So going into step 2, where we look really sort of more into the quantitative analysis, this picture was further confirmed. Again, the mountain regions are sticking out because we're actually having less pesticide use or no pesticide use. But at the same time, when you look more at the monetary value, these mountain regions are actually not performing that well or less well than the hill and the valley region. Why is that? I mean, in the end, what we know, and I'll show you both the net income tape indicator, but also our income assessments, which we do on these farms as well. It's mainly these systems are just following one value chain, which is very often related to the dairy value chain. So our results are pretty robust between step 1 and step 2. Now, going more into the agricultural biodiversity indicator. So at the moment, we assess sort of wildlife biodiversity based on a complex Swiss agricultural life cycle assessment model, which is a semi-quantitative point system. Very simply, the higher the better. It has sort of a foundation in more than 1,000 peer-reviewed scientific publications on abundance of snails, of spiders, and different plant species. And it's very Swiss-focused or more sort of Central Europe-focused. And we knew that this wouldn't be feasible for tape, so what is the next best? And then we thought about, like, can we think about proxies, which we can go through the questionnaire? Proxies that drive biodiversity, and we come up with 10 components. And I show you just the results again for these 3 regions within Switzerland when we tested that. The 10 components within just agricultural biodiversity or landscape scale biodiversity include land use change, grazing intensity, average stocking rate, plant protection, products, applied nitrogen, or the abundance of natural habitats. And now the picture is actually much better also in terms of diversity for these hill or mountain regions, because we know that the typical pastures are way more biodiverse than, for instance, a simple cropland in the valleys. So what did we learn from that? Why improved? Well, we are able to base the new indicator on these proxies. It goes clearly beyond the agrobiodiversity currently implemented in TAPE, and we can over time define trends in this. And when we compare our high-end sorts of biodiversity indicator here on the x-axis at the bottom with the point scale, what I mentioned before, to this improvement, we know that this is actually comparing quite well for the moment. Now, of course, as scientists, we are always questioning ourselves, okay, why is this relation not the best? In the end, you're going to see we had a relatively limited sample size of 25 farms or so in Switzerland. And we would have liked to do the comparison with the TAPE indicator, but since we're looking at different scales, such as agri-biodiversity compared to landscape biodiversity, we couldn't do that. Before I come to an end, I would still quickly show you some results from Kenya. This is really hot off from Kenya, actually from last weekend, the last data from the 51 farms in one of the counties, step 1 analysis. Just focus on the yellow line, which is the mean of these average farms, the widespread of agroecological performance of the 51 farms. And we see quite well that some of these farms perform quite well in terms of circularity, but also on the cultural element, whereas we know they are already a little bit lower, for instance, in terms of governance when you compare it to Switzerland. And with that, I would like to end. And I just want to stress once again, the system, the diversity of the system, also in terms of livestock and the different cropping systems you're having, and the integration of that is absolutely essential for the agroecological transformation. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Mr. Mirbold, for this inspiring contribution and showing us different possibilities of working with TAPE in Kenya and Switzerland. Now we will hear from Mr. Salia Hibi, who is the project manager at Association for Research and Training in Agroecology in Burkina Faso. Mr. Hebi, I hand over to you. Mr. Hebi?
Vous me recevez?
Oui.
Allô? Ok, d'accord, ok. Merci bien et bonsoir à tout le monde. Donc, je suis Ebié Salia de l'ONG ARFA. Je vais vous présenter les résultats de l'étude sur le type pastoralisme que nous avons conduit en collaboration avec la FAO. OK, donc il faut noter que cette étude a été conduite dans le cadre des projets. Il y a une partie qui s'est occupée du type standard et l'autre sur le type pastoralisme. Pour le type standard, donc nous avons essayé de combiner cette étude à la cartographie des marchés territoriaux, ce qui nous a permis de trouver une parfaite relation entre la transition agroécologique et le fonctionnement et même l'existence des marchés territoriaux. Donc, pour ce qui nous concerne, qui porte sur le type de pastoralisme, l'étude a été conduite dans 3 régions du Burkina Faso et la zone concernée a été la zone nord-soudanienne qui est la partie vert clair ici au milieu. Donc, il y a 128 ménages qui ont été enquêtés. Donc, il faut noter que ce sont les 10 éléments de l'agroécologie qui ont été utilisés pour évaluer la version test du type pour les pasteurs. Il y a 2 systèmes d'élevage qui ont été identifiés, à savoir les systèmes semi-extensifs et le système semi-transhumant. Au niveau des hauts bassins, nous avons exclusivement le système semi-transhumant et dans les autres régions, c'était le système semi-extensif. Donc, à l'issue des résultats, nous constatons que la moitié des ménages sont en transition naissante vers l'agroécologie, donc ce qui nous donne une médiane de 49,8. Et quand on rentre à l'intérieur des 10 éléments de l'agroécologie, donc nous constatons qu'au niveau du recyclage et des cultures traditionnelles et alimentaires, donc nous sommes à une étape de la transition vers l'agroécologie. En considérant le niveau de la caillette en fonction des typologies, donc nous constatons que le système sédentaire est en transition naissante avec une caillette qui a moyenne de 50, tandis que le système semi-transhumant en transition vers l'agroécologie. Donc, ça dit de façon globale que le système semi-transhumant s'avère être beaucoup plus intéressant en matière de transition agroécologique que le système extensif. Donc, cette différence s'explique par le fait que dans le système semi-transhumant, donc, il y a une mobilité saisonnière des pasteurs, ce qui les permet de s'installer dans des zones plus favorables pour la production et également c'est la valorisation des résidus qui est beaucoup plus intéressante pour le système semi-transhumant. Donc, dans la région des hauts bassins où c'est le système semi-transhumant qui est exclusivement réalisé, donc nous constatons que les résidus sont beaucoup disposés dans les champs, ce qui permet un recyclage. Donc, dans le système semi-transhumant au Burkina, nous avons une communauté presque homogène. C'est la communauté Peul qui est conservatrice des traditions, ce qui explique un score de caillette élevé pour ce qui est de la culture et les transitions alimentaires. Et également, ces producteurs, ces pasteurs sont en association, sont regroupés dans une association qu'on appelle l'association de Rouga, voilà, qui est où dans cette association, les sédentaires extensifs ne s'y trouvent pas. Donc, ce qui explique une gouvernance assez intéressante à ce niveau. Donc, en répartant par région, donc on voit clairement que dans les hauts bassins, le score de la caillette est plus élevé. Donc, cette zone tend vers une transition agroécologique. Donc, ce qui permet d'orienter les politiques nationales en matière de proposition d'activités pour permettre aux producteurs de ces régions de tendre vers une transition agroécologique. Donc, en essayant d'analyser un certain nombre d'indicateurs de performance, on se rend compte que le revenu global pour le système semi-transhumant est plus élevé que le système extensif. En termes de recommandations, il faut noter qu'au niveau de la diversité, donc il faut aller vers une diversification de la production fourragère. Donc pour ce qui est des traditions culinaires, il faut aller vers une bonne organisation des producteurs et valorisation des savoir-faire locaux. Et pour la gouvernance, travailler à fédérer les producteurs. Donc, de façon globale, en termes d'appréciation sur l'outil TEP, il faut noter que c'est un outil qui est assez complet, qui prend en compte beaucoup de paramètres. Donc, il permet de mieux apprécier l'effet de la transition sur les phénomènes sociaux tels que l'immigration, le genre et bien d'autres éléments. Donc, mais il est nécessaire que nous puissions définir le poids de chaque élément de la transition. Quand on prend 10 éléments de la transition, que nous puissions définir des poids de chaque élément en fonction des spécificités des pays. Donc, il y a également un besoin de contextualisation pour la prise en compte des systèmes de production des zones, notamment pour le Burkina Faso. Quand je prends un exemple pour les ménages qui disposent de 2 ou 4 champs, donc c'est un système qui est carrément différent des systèmes peut-être dans d'autres pays où ce sont des fermes où chaque exploitation dispose d'une ferme. Donc voilà ce que j'avais à présenter en termes de résultats sur le thé pastoral. Je vous remercie.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Heby, for this presentation and bringing this case study in relation to the livestock sector. With this, we come to our last presenter for session 2, Dr. Radha Kong, National Project Coordinator at the Asset Project in Cambodia with the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. Mr. Kong, we're looking forward to see your presentation. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much from this very good evening, everyone from Cambodia. Thanks so much for the opportunity for me to share the experience of using tape in Cambodia. My sharing will be more focused on the feedback and suggestion how to improve the tape use. In Cambodia, Cambodia is part of the first country who tested the tape in 2020, led by the Luang Corporation, supported by the tape team of the FAO, the 8 organization, and I am leading one of the 8, what we call the Cambodia Conservation Agriculture Research for Development Centers. Under General Directorate of Agriculture, Ministry of Agriculture. We tested the tape with 235 households in 5 provinces in the 4 agroecosystem in Cambodia. And also that recently, Unifocop is a 4 Belgium and Chile consortium, and Luang Corporation is one of the 4. Through the partner project, they constructed the Ecoland. Ecoland is the center of the Royal University of Agriculture to conduct a tape for their targeted province and targeted province and villages with the 238 households. And also there are also other organizations who may already use the tape. I'm sorry that I don't have the data here. Like Dario mentioned that the Danish Church 8 DCA may be already used the tape. Here's some of the key results from the tape test. Generally, we have.
Mr. Dr. Kong, I'm not seeing your presentation. Are you?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to share my screen. You should have told me earlier.
Sorry about that. No problem.
My apologies.
You can go directly to this slide you were describing. Thank you.
Can you see my screen right now?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. Yes, here's the key result from the tape test. Generally, we have a strong correlation between the higher transition of the agroecology, the more positive result from the core criteria performance step 2. Like here, we saw that there's an increase of the animal incomes and also the less expend on the input. we see also that there are also a higher agrobiodiversity with the higher transition of the agroecology farm, and also the land and labor productivity. There's also higher labor and land productivities also. But then we have found that actually the relationship could be also different between the territory. Like here in the lowland territories, there's a correlation on the animal income, agricultural biodiversity, and the input costs. But then for the upland territory, we see that there's a relationship for the dietary diversity, crop income, and women's empowerments. So from the tape test, and also from my experience training the enumerators to conduct the tape for the UniFocus, we regarding for the advantage, of course, as we know that the tape is an holistic, stepwise, and robust tool that allow us to assess multi-dimension. It's 5 dimension on the right side here. More than that, tape is already ready in 24 language, and it's in Kobo that we can just download and then just conduct for our projects as a baseline or the impact assessment. And also that with the tape, like step 1 for the characterization of the agroecology transition, it quickly can it allows us to quickly know the stage of the agroecology transition, to know which elements or which dimension that are weak, and so that we can prioritize our resource and our focus of our intervention to improve those weak elements. And also that tape in Cambodia, unfortunately we don't have enough budget to conduct up to the step 3. But even during the survey, we have like asking a lot of questions regarding the production system and also the practices, which can allow the respondent to reflect the practices within their farm. And then like the experience from Argentina, if we could already conduct the step 3, it's really a full participatory process, which allow the respondent and also a group of the community to reflect and also to understand what is the step forward, the pathway forward to the agroecology transition. Along with the advantage, of course, we found some limitation. Tape take more time compared to the classical survey. On average, we need to spend 2 hours and a half, and because most of the question actually are aggregated question which embedded the sub question. For example, when we ask the total cost on the chemical fertilizer, we also need to ask the chemical fertilizer used for rice, for different crops, so that we can sum up. And also that, for those who have experience doing the agrarian diagnosis, the diagnosis of the agrarian system, may have the feeling of, like, for example, for me, have the feeling of lack of the full understanding on the function and the interaction between the subsystem of the whole farming system. And also that, that tape allow us to assess multi-dimension, but then also the enumerator need to have also the multi-dimension knowledge, the knowledge on those dimensions also. And also that some of the questions that we found, especially with the question also suggestion from the enumerator, because they asked, for example, this question, the significant number and high number. So the 10, is it significant, or 15 or 20? So that's why for our suggestion, it's very, very helpful as part of the step 0, to characterize the territory. I think it's good to have the preliminary study, to go to the field, conducting some of the tool of the rapid rural appraisal, like focus group discussion, to understand the context feature and enabling environment, the socio-economic situation, but also the biophysical and especially the diversity of the farming system, the production system, the farming practices, and then during the training for the enumerators. We're training for the enumerator to understand every single of the question of the tape, but also it's very important for the enumerator to know already the context of the territory that we're going to conduct the tape. For example, you see the picture that, especially for the soil health, most of the enumerator maybe have no knowledge about the soil health, so that we brought the soil cloth and explain the 5 dimension, the 5 indicator of how we assess the soil health. Thank you very much. Just for your information, the tape available in Khmer, and I myself have improved the translation a lot, so that I think we can use the tape much better for the Khmer language. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kong, and thanks to all of the presenters who shared with us their experience with tape. We are a bit behind, but I'll still proceed with the third session, which is the question and answer session. And I will ask a few questions that were posed in the chat. The first question to Anne Motte, this is from Eric Scopel. What are the reasons of for such a big demand in sub-Saharan Africa in comparison to the other regions? Do you have an answer for this, Anne?
Well, it's a good question, not an easy one to answer. I'm not sure if the demand was higher per se, or that our sample is higher actually in sub-Saharan Africa. In terms of number of countries, we see that we have also a large number of countries that were asking for working with tape and with FAO in Latin America, for example. Maybe it's the size of the samples. I would say that samples are larger when we are working in support of development projects for IFAD, for FAO, for JEF projects, for example, than when we're working with NGOs or with academia and research. So that can explain. But I also think that there are taped applications that are also happening independently of FAO. So these are the applications that we have been involved in and for which we have data in our online collection tool, COBO. But other partners have been using paper questionnaires, and we might not know what they've done with the data. So that can also explain the differences between regions. So we've worked in partnerships maybe a bit more closely with partners in Africa than other regions. Over.
Thank you very much, Anne. And my next question is for Alejandro, Mr. Marengo. The question is from Celeste. She asks, how did you evaluate the improvement in women's empowerment conditions? How did you evaluate the improvements in women's empowerment conditions?
Hola, sí, bueno, nosotros lo que utilizamos es la metodología que propone TAPE, que es una metodología que usa Naciones Unidas, donde hay 5 dimensiones o índices o indicadores de análisis. Nosotros lo que pudimos ver muy claramente es que esos 5 indicadores son más positivos a medida que se avanza en agroecología, pero sobre todo hay un indicador que se destaca sobre otros, que no lo mostré por el escaso tiempo que teníamos, pero que es el control sobre las decisiones económicas y el manejo de los recursos económicos, cómo influye la agroecología en que la mujer tenga mayor decisión sobre cómo utilizar el dinero o las inversiones en los establecimientos productivos. Esa es una diferencia realmente muy importante.
Ronnie, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. There was a question about the presentations being shared. Yes, they will be shared and the recording will be available on FAO's website. I will ask one more question because we're running a bit behind time. This question is a general question, but maybe I'll ask Dr. Kong. There was a question about the cost of applying tape. From your experience, what was the general cost of applying the tool?
Thank you very much for the question. I mean, regarding for the cost, it could be more expensive than classical household surveys because we need more time for the training of the enumerators, and also the survey also need more time. For per days, we could target two household per day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and the training at least 3 days. So I would say like 20%, 25% more expensive, 15 to 25% more expensive. I'm sorry, I have no clear like on the implementation, because the UNIFOCOP have these unit costs per household. They just finished the survey and they are doing now the analysis. We can provide more clear unit costs later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kong. And I suspect that the cost of the applying tape will depend on the cost in the countries, basically. And thank you. We can't answer any more questions, but we'll move on, and hopefully we can send you by email some responses. The next session is the challenges and next steps. Anne and Remy will present this. Who will present first?
Anne,
the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. We're going to be quick because we don't want to keep participants after the time we agreed on. Can you see my screen? Oh, yes, it's on the screen. So just a few points on what are next steps. First, we want to continue working on the relevance of tape and how it performs in different contexts and for different types of views. You've seen the work we're conducting on the biodiversity indicator. We're also working a lot on the contextualization of questionnaires. We heard from Salia the good experience we have on the pastoralist version of the questionnaire, but we're also working with the indigenous people to better account of indigenous people in tape questionnaires. We're going to continue disseminating results. We have here on the screen a couple of results at country level that were already published. We are working, as you could see, on a cross-country analysis, and we need the support of our partners for that. The three important things is continue reporting to our governing bodies, in particular to COAG, but also the next phases of the tape validation process that we're starting today with this presentation and information sharing. We want to carry on an online consultation that we will probably start at the beginning of next year for both partners who have already used tape and want to provide feedback, and those who have not yet and would like to, who are interested and would like to give feedback from what they learned today, for example. And this will be to collect information about the relevance of the tool, is ease or not of use, its strengths and weaknesses, what type of use and what type of interest we have for using tape, for which purpose, and so on. And after this phase online, we will start planning a validation workshop that we will hold in Rome, probably in the spring of next year, in person, with possibility of remote participation probably. And this will be in order to consolidate the whole learning exercise that we had with tape over its piloting phase, long piloting phase, to reach a consensus and confirm the community of practice around tape, and also to discuss the possible updates, the possible advanced versions, not versions, but advanced criteria, like we see, for example, for biodiversity, that are proposed for tape for specific contexts and specific research agenda sometimes. And what kind of process do we need for continuing the generation of harmonized evidence as FAO and as we were requested to do by our member nation. Thank you, and over to you, Remy.
Yes, so next slide, please. So, yes, this one. Don't worry, I won't comment it too much. Just, we speak about next step, and we can't have next step without all your partners. So you are mentioned there, but I think we forgot many of you, and we forgot the name of the producer, of course, who all worked on that. So thank you to everybody for that, because it's really important. A lot was done, a lot is yet to be done. So TAPE is under continuous improvement, and so we need you for that. So really, thank you to everybody. I won't be longer for that. Next slide. I would like to thank also the financer. We have the Jeff, we have the Mike Knight Foundation, the GIZ, Germany, Switzerland, and SPC Pacific, and France. So we are supported in implementing TAPE, but also in developing TAPE. So that's really important because we always need like research development for TAPE. We need to improve. And this is a really important part, not only the implementation. So thanks for all. And now I won't be long. So now I give the floor back to Ronnie.
Thank you, Remy and Anne. And I would like to invite Director Jingyuan Xia to give concluding remarks. Director Xia, please, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Ronnie, and the dear colleague and the participants and the speaker. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity make some conclusion remark. I listened through the whole process. I think this was my conclusion. This webinar is very, very successful and fruitful. So what's my meaning? In just 3 words, I can say that. The first one is very informative. A lot of information from different angle, informative. Second one is inclusive. This means from a different stakeholder, from a country, from a university, and together. Yeah? Number 3, very encouraging. It's very promising, very encouraging. And furthermore, I want to say the first, and is active participation. Also, our director of animals mentioned that over 1,000 people registered for this webinar. I make a count, 455 participants online. Yeah, very big number, yeah, very big number. So very active participation. Second one, I can say, excellent presentation. Number 4 presentation is very clear for me, yeah? And we know what is step 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, yeah? It's mainly from Remy, from Dario, and Frank. I think 4 presentation is very excellent, yeah? I really learn a lot, yeah? It's great, yeah? That's it. And then, number 3, I can say fantastic partner report. Show very good case, particularly Argentina in this case, give very good impression. You how to apply it, yeah? It's really very good, yeah, very good. So this tool, we should use it in farmer field, in country level, in the farmer field. So in this case, as Argentina, Kenya, Burkina Faso, and Cambodia, all the 4 cases is really make sense. Yeah, make sense. This really, I learned a lot. Yeah, so I can say this is why I can say it's very, very successful. And the second one, I think the people, at least for me, and there's a lot of gaining or achievements. What is the major achievement or result? I can say through this workshop and this webinar. And then this is about, we fully understand, I can say, at least 3 major objectives of TAPES. Number 1, provide global and harmonized evidence. Yeah, number 1, it's very clear. Second one, and support agroecological transition, also very clear by all the presentation. Number 3, and the developing capacity of the producer and the partner through collective process. Yeah, this is 3 objectives very clear. More important, and the 4th step, includes 10 elements, It's really very important for this tool. And if you want to use the tool, you first should know the tool. I think this is a major achievement, maybe it's my understanding for this webinar. Number 3, the way forward. Now, evidence shows it very clear. The way forward, I really encourage everybody to use it. The executive support was the FAO 2022-2031 agenda. If you know that, everybody okay. For better, right? The production, better nutrition, better environment, and then better life. You know one means. Among this 4 better, remember, we have 20 priority program, right? PPA. Number first PPA is better production, BP1. BP1 is led by NSP, and then joined by NSA, NSL, and then also NFO. So all the production together. So why I mentioned that one, and then I think the first time, I don't know before maybe, and then NSL and NSP and NSA. Food, feed, right? Should work together. Yeah. This is agro system. So I think it's a very good approach. It's the way forward. What's the way forward? Number 1, and use this tool. Now tool is ready. Let's use it. We already mentioned that. Give me a tool. We can do it. Now tool available, please widely apply it. Second one on the result. We should use this result to evidence, make advocacy, and then to the government, and then to stakeholder, and then to farmers. Of course, the government should support. Stakeholder should even financial support. The government is, political winning support, yeah? And stakeholder financial support. First, should use it. So second one. Number 3, and then I think the follow-up. What's the follow-up? We already mentioned the webinar is the first step to share of initial result, but the tool is open to continue improvement. For instance, today you can discover the work of biodiversity indicator, particularly the guy from Switzerland, Swiss, to use that one, and then in Kenya. It's so good. So we can use it. So this means a validation workshop is planned during the first semester in 2023 to fine-tune the tool. Before that, we organize a virtual consultation, and your feedback will be fundamental. So this is the way forward. Now take this opportunity, I want to say a lot of thanks, and then particularly to our presenter and the aid presenter. You have done an excellent job. Yeah, it's really very important. You're a major player. Also, thanks to our audience, they're so actively engaged. There is a lot of chat box question I notified. Yeah, it's very interesting. Most important one, to share the PowerPoint. The police ran me and share the PowerPoint. This information is so important. Don't waste this information. And then lastly, of course, I should express myself to our very important interpreter. Without their translation, we cannot think about the Latin language. We don't know it. And thank you again, and have a very, very pleasant, and take care. And over to you, Remy.
Thank you, Director Shah. And thank you all for joining us today. This event was recorded, and you can download it at FAO webcast page, where you can review all of the interventions. If you have any further questions, please email us at agroecology@fao.org, and we will get back to you. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.